Uma has spread all the writing materials out of the table, first removing the embroidered tablecloth so as not to stain it with ink or have it cramp her writing. She draws up a chair and bends it over, lips clenched inwards as she waits for Papa to begin dictating the letter. She knows she must get it right. The aerogram costs money. It cannot be torn up like a sheet of paper and thrown away. A fresh one used instead. Papa has warned her about this over and over again. There is a silence, filling by the constant muttering of pigeons sitting on the roll-up mat. Their voices sound like warnings to Uma. She squints at them in irritation. Now, where are you looking? Just concentrate on the letter, Uma, Papa scolds. I am, Papa, I am. What am I to write? Write, Dear Arun. Papa clears his throat, speaking slowly. We are happy to hear you have done well in the examinations and can now take a well-earned rest. Wait, wait, cries Uma, frantically trying to get the pen to catch up with the words. Oof, you're so slow, he complains. She is slow, Mama agrees, quite unnecessarily. But this gives Uma time to catch up. She breathes heavily with the effort. Mr. O'Henry has come up with a suggestion. You might remember Mr. O'Henry from St. John's School. Put that in brackets, Uma. Uma had started out writing, put that in brackets, and now has to scratch it out. She tries to do unobtrusively, but Papa notices and explodes. Don't you know what brackets are? What did they teach you at the convent? At the convent, she tells him, looking up, the nuns would dictate open brackets, close brackets. So we knew. Then, how is it you don't know? He fumes and goes on quickly. Mrs. O'Henry's sister lives in the same town as you. Her name is Mrs. Patton, and she has one son and one daughter. Mrs. O'Henry has written to her, and she's willing to let you have a room for the month. You cannot stay in the dormitory. What kind of rule is this? Mama interrupts, still fuming over it. If students cannot stay in the dormitory, where are they to stay? Off. Papa turns his irritation upon her. Don't you understand? When the university is closed for the summer. I understand, Mama says closely. But where are they to go? That they do not say. But Mrs. O'Henry's sister has offered. Papa, what I am to write? Am I to write willing to let you have a room, or has offered, or what? Mama retires in half, and Papa turns his attention to Uma, bending forward to make sure she has not muddled the two versions. His deep frown indicates how great a labor this is, as great for him as for Uma. Both are perspiring and have to stop to mop their necks and faces frequently. The aerogram is looking damp and wilted as well. It is not of the same quality as those Arun uses in America. The pigeons on the roofs continue their scolding, complaining, and grumbling. Mama is one who drops, holding her head in her hand. She has a headache. When she hears Papa conclude the letter with Mama and Uma saying their love yours awfully, she sighs and leans back, saying sadly, who knows what this sister of Mrs. O'Henry is like? Who knows if she will look after Arun properly? Papa glares at her and tells her how fortunate Arun is to have a home offered for him free of charge. Uma cannot resist adding, O'Henrys are very kind people, to remind them of all the times they had failed to see what is now so evident. But when Mama, Papa both turn to glare at her, she thinks it better to change the subject, in fact, to bring the whole matter to a close. Now I am going in, she tells them, standing up. My eyes are paining. Your eyes are paining just after writing one letter? Oof. Papa lets her know what he thinks of such weakness. Uma is indignant. All the indignation of the morning has mounted and now reaches its climax. I have told you many times my eyes hurt, she cries. Mama agrees with her. Yes, her eyes are giving her trouble. She has told me they hurt her. Perhaps she should see a specialist. Uma has taken off her spectacles and stands rubbing her eyes. Everyone's eyesight grows weaker as they grow older, Papa declares. Don't you know that? You think my eyes have not grown weaker? Yes, but you went to see the doctor and he gave you new glasses, Mama reminds him. He settles back in silence, and his face close to all these annoying hints and suggestions being thrown out by the two women. It is like a gate closing on unwanted visitors. Papa called Uma to the telephone, which stood on the desk of his study. He looked extremely irritated at being interrupted in his work. The less there was of it, Uma observed, the more fiercely he made sure it was known to everyone. Those convent nuns, he grumbled as he handed over the phone with extreme reluctance. You must tell them not to keep calling. Keep calling? Uma cried and snatched the phone from him. The nuns had never called her before. Yes, yes, she shouted. It was Mother Agnes, her voice sounding very faded, and if it were a long-distant call. Uma, dear, she crackled, like a paper parcel being opened. You know, we are getting ready for the Christmas bazaar. Mrs. O'Henry from the Baptist Mission wants to put up a stall, but she needs someone to help her. Would you be willing to, dear? You know, we will all busy ourselves with the games and food stalls and the concert. Uma was so willing that she was able to ignore Papa's glare totally as she shouted into the phone, I'll come, Mother, I'll come. When she turned around to go and tell Mama, she found Mama in the doorway, listening, so that they nearly slammed into each other. But in spite of her, in spite of them, it was a day to remember. It was a day as all days ought to be, not just a single one in the whole year, a single one in a whole lifetime. If Uma was asked to paint a picture of heaven, then heaven would have paper lanterns hanging from the trees along the drive and around the school courtyard, pots of white and yellow chrysanthemums like white boiled eggs in freshly painted flower pots in the veranda stairs. It would have tiny Lopez band playing Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and away in a manger. In a marquee in the netball field. It would have stalls all along one length of it, where ladies stood frying potato fritters and selling toffees in packets of crankly pink crepe paper, bottled drinks, and candy floss. It would have stalls all along the opposite length, where girls in blue sleeves and white blouses and ribbons supervised games of chance, looky dips, pin the tail on the donkey, toss the hoop, guess the weight of the plum cake. It would have nuns twittering with unaccustomed glee, schoolgirls shrieking to each other down bustling corridors, and someone cracking up the gramophone to play all 45 RPM records like My Darling Clementine and the Donkey Serenade. And Uma would have her own place in that heaven besides the Baptist missionary wife with her 2 braids of shining golden hair, not only permitted but asked to handle the little packet of cards tinsel with leafy ferns or decorate with satin bows, sequin stars, and pressed violets. She would collect money in a tin for the Flash and Place lady who would smile and smile whenever anyone put some money into it and would say at the end of the day to Mother Agnes, "What a fortune we've made for the poor. Every card sold. This dear girl has been such a help. For a treat, for a price, she would be given a free chance at the lucky dip, and come up with a cloth-bound volume of Ella Wheeler Wilcox's poem, only slightly soiled, to take home as a memento." Mama did not come to the bazaar. Mama rarely went anywhere without Papa, and then it was only to social events, a bridge evening at the club, or a wedding reception for a friend's daughter. Now that Papa was at home all day, the surreptitious visits to the neighbors for a round of running were no longer possible. If anything needed to be communicated to Mrs. Joshi, it was Aya or Mali or now and then Uma, who was sent across with a message. Mama did not object to Uma visiting the neighbors, as long as it did not happen too often or without her knowledge. After all, they had known Mrs. Joshi ever since she came to the house on the other side of the hedge as a bride, and when her mother-in-law was still alive and still ruled that house like an evil impress of ancient history, able to shrivel the entire garden with her touch, turn sherbet into tepid water. Children came to punishment. The young Mrs. Joshi had often slipped through the hedge and come to Mama to complain, even cry a little, but her tears had never lasted. Her complaints were overtaken by laughter. She had an endless fount of good humor that made her cheeks fill out and turn round like burns, even while she was complaining that she could not drink milk or eat sweets without the evil one criticizing her for being greedy. The problem was that this woman's son loved his wife. One could see it in the half smile that hovered about his face whenever she was near, the way he contrived to smuggle her out of the house and take her to the cinema, the way the two would murmur together and wiggle helplessly while the old lady glared furtively. It was what kept Mrs. Joshi's eyes so bright, her cheeks so plump, and she was always willing to be drawn into the girls' bedroom and look at Aruna's latest purchase and admires Uma's collection of glass bangles. "Where then, Uma? Where then? Why do you hide them away in your cupboard?" she would ask. She never came without some little gift she had managed to smuggle out of the house, and always inquired tenderly after Cousin Anamika, having heard how she too suffered at the hands of a mother-in-law as grateful as her own. When that one finally died, young Mrs. Joshi went through all the ceremonies and rituals with impeccable propriety, then took over the household with great aplomb, attaching the bundle of house keys to her own waist, and so began her own benevolent rule, where under the old tyrant there had been nothing but dust and desolation around the big house. Mrs. Joshi now had a bed of roses bloom in her front garden, while at the back were beds of fresh vegetables, so profuse and luxuriant that their bounty was shared with all the neighbors. Her children played all over the place freely. The boys' cricket bats and balls littered the verandas, and swing hung from the big trees. The boys won prizes at school, got jobs, moved to the big cities. The daughters were married off, one after the other, and were now bringing up their own children, teaching in nursery schools, painting or block printing on textile, giving or taking music lessons, and living lives that seemed as easy as light as the flight of sparrows. Only the youngest, Moyana, had inexplicably developed a desire to be different, to have a career. They had all been surprised, a little amused, and indulgent her little whim. She has off in Delhi pursuing her career, and they laugh, waiting for her to return. As she had left, Uma would put her arms around Mrs. Joshi, nuzzling her freshly powdered neck, and tease, "Won't you adopt me, auntie? Won't you let me be your daughter now Moyana is gone?" And Mrs. Joshi would reply laughing, "Of course. Stay here, be my daughter," then give her a gentle nudge in the direction of her own house with a basket of mangoes or a jar of pickles for mamma. A career, living home, living alone. These troubling secret possibilities now enter Uma's mind, as mamma would have pointed out had she known, whenever Uma has ill. They were like seams dropped on the stony, arid land that Uma inhabited. Sometimes, miraculously, they sprout forth the idea, run away, escape, but Uma could not visualize escape in the form of a career. What was a career? She had no idea. Her vision of escape, a refuge, took the form of a huge and ancient banyan tree with streaming gray air roots, leafy branches in which monkeys and parrots feasted on berries. Sometimes she heard the berries raining down on the zinc roof, which baked in the clean white sun. Down below there was a river where the sun glistened and trickle of water gleamed, not the broad, deep, inexorable river running by their own town that had once parted to take her in and drawn her away, and from which she had been violently torn. She heard the sound of the water jan being set down on the veranda floor. When she closed her eyes, the small motes that drift through the darkness turned into kites, cycling and circling and soaring on air currents at a great elevation. Then she saw herself seated on a stone step, listening to the parakeets in the banyan trees, looking out at the flash of water in the sand and the kites hover in the sky, so high above that they merge with infinity. But then she would feel Mira's massive hands descend on her shoulders and grasp her, and hear her voice intoning, "You are the Lord's child. I see his mark on you," or "The Lord has rejected the man you choose. He has chosen you for himself." And Uma would give a start. Then, being thrashing her arms around and looking about her wildly, making mamma cry, "Uma, what's the matter? Uma!" And she would subside, and as she subsided, feel herself drawn by an undercurrent into a secret depth, so dark that she could see nothing at all, just the darkness.